write a linear equation from a table, from a graph, or from words follows, pretty much the same pattern. First thing you're going to do is find your slope. Remember, that's change in y over change in x. Then you're going to find your y-intercept. What that means is where it crosses the y-axis. So where it crosses the y-axis. Also at that point, x is equal to what? So if this was where it crosses the y-axis, whatever y value that is, x is always equal to 0. So same thing here. So x is always equal to 0 where it crosses the y-axis. So your y-intercept is where x is equal to 0 where it crosses the y-axis. You might have to fill in values to find it. Okay, so you'll see what that means in a second. Then you're going to use the y equals mx plus b to write down the equation. So here are 3 examples from a table. And the first thing we're going to do is find the slope. So remember, to find the slope from a table, if you've forgotten, you just need to go down to your slope. And this is how you find from a table. So change in y over change in x. You just find out how it's changing in y and how it's changing in x. So you do y is always on top. So the change in y over the change in x.
So listening check, color in those 2 triangles.
So for change in y, it goes from 3 to 5. How did I add? 2. 5 to 7, add 2. 7 to 9, add 2. 9 to 12, I add 2. So my change in y is adding 2. My change in x, from -2 to -1, I'm adding 1. -1 to 0, add in 1. 0 to 1, add in 1. 1 to 2, add in 1. So add in 1. Then you just simplify. Positive with a positive is a positive. Then 2 divided by 1 is 2. So my slope is equal to 2. So I found my slope. Find your y-intercept. So your y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis, is where x is equal to 0. So you just look for x, and do you see 0? I do. So this right here is my y-intercept because x is equal to 0. So my y-intercept is 7. Right, you might have to find values, fill it in if the 0 is not there, but it is here, so you're fine. Then use y equals mx plus b to write your equation. So my final equation is y equals m, which is what? The slope. And what is the slope in our question? 2. And then you write x plus b, wherever the y-intercept is. So where's the y-intercept? 7.
So listening check, color in y equals 2x plus 7.
All right, let's take a look at another example. So again, first thing you need to do is to find the slope. Change in y over the change in x. So change in y over change in x. So y, we're going from 1 to 2. So what did I do? Added 1. From 2 to 3, add 1. 3 to 4, add 1. 4 to 5, add 1. So my change in y is adding 1. My change in x is -1 to +1. It's adding 2. 1 to 3, adding 2. 3 to 5, adding 2. 5 to 7, adding 2. So I'm adding 2. A positive and positive is a positive. Divided by a positive, is a positive. And then 1 divided by 2 doesn't simplify, it stays 1/2. Okay, once I found my slope, I then look for my y-intercept. Where does it cross the y-axis? So I'm looking for when x is equal to 0. But when I look here, I don't see that x is equal to 0. And that's why it says you might have to fill in the values to find it. So 0 happens, if it goes from -1 to 1, 0 happens somewhere in between here, right? So if I put in a 0 here, and here I added 2, so I went from -1 to 1, right? I added 2. So if I added 2 and I want to find in my missing value, so I want to go, instead of adding 2, I want to go from -1 to 0. And from here to here, I added 1, okay? Which means for me to go halfway, because halfway between -1 and 1 would be 0. Instead of adding 1, I would be adding what? 0.5. Does that make sense? So to go from here to find it with 0, this is going to be 1.5. Y equals m. What's m? My m is 1/2. And then x. And where does it cross? It crosses at 1.5. Now another way of writing 1.5 in fractions is 3 over 2. But they will tell you how they want it to look like, because 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. Alright, example 3. Find the slope. So again, change in y over change in x. So this is my y. How does it change? From -4 to -9, I'm getting more negative, so I'm subtracting 1.5. From -9 to -14, I'm subtracting 5.
So listening check, put a circle around example 3, the word example.
Keep subtracting 5. So my change is subtract 5. From -6 to -5, I'm getting more closer towards a positive, so I'm adding 1. So I'm adding 1 every time, adding 1. So my change in x is +1. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. 5 divided by 1 is 5. So my slope is -5. Then you find the y-intercept where x is equal to 0. So I don't see x is equal to 0, so I need to find it. Which way do I need to go? It's not in between any of these numbers, but this is getting closer, right? So it would go -2, and I don't really have space to write this here, so I'm going to write it here. It will go, so if I'm adding 1 every time, it will go -2, then it will go -1, then it will go 0, because all I'm doing is adding the 1. Then it will go 1, like that, right? So this is x, this is y. Okay, so -2, if I add 1, it's going to be -1. If I add 1 to that, it's going to be 0, which is what I'm looking for right there, right? So I just need to find what the y is when x is equal to 0. Okay, so then what am I doing with these numbers each time? I'm subtracting 5. So on the next one, I'm going to subtract 5. So -24 subtract 5 will be -29. Then after that, I'm going to subtract another 5, so it's going to be -34. And now I've got into the 0 one. Okay, so now I know what my y-intercept is, which is -34. So again, you just find the pattern, which is adding 1 every time, and you keep doing it until you get to the 0. Sometimes you have to go this way. It just depends on where the 0 is. Once you find the 0, you can stop, and then now you do whatever the change in y until you get to that point. So -34. So again, you write it down. Y equals m, which is the slope, which is -5. X plus b, which is -34.
The listening check, color in y equals -5x minus 34.
So again, where x is equal to 0 is your y-intercept. So that's how you'd write the equation y minus mx plus b from a table,